Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. We're looking at some really fascinating material you've shared with us. Today, well, it's a pretty unconventional take on our government and courts. The core idea presented is that they operate as a kind of governmental bank.
That's right. It's definitely a perspective that asks you to maybe rethink the basics of these institutions. The sources we're looking at suggest that, beneath the surface of justice and governance as we usually see them,
Right.
there's this other function, managing financial instruments and something they call legal fictions.
Exactly. So if you've ever had that feeling like there's something more going on with how the system really works, this might resonate. We've got some excerpts here that really lay out this theory. They're quite compelling, though maybe a bit jarring too.
Definitely potentially jarring.
Our mission today is just to explore these claims, unpack what the sources are saying about this alleged financial operation and what it means for people.
Okay, so let's get right to it. This governmental bank concept. The core argument in these sources is that places we know, like courthouses, maybe even county offices, their main job isn't necessarily delivering justice in the way we think. Instead, they're presented as having this fundamental banking role.
Okay, hold on. Let's unpack that. So not just interpreting laws, keeping order,
Yeah.
but managing financial instruments and these legal fictions. What does that mean, practically, in their view?
Well, the assertion is pretty bold. These sources argue that the banking system itself is fundamentally fraudulent.
Fraudulent. How so?
They claim deceptive methods are used to control assets, sure, but also to control you, the individual, through these things called legal fictions. Like the system treats people and their property almost like financial commodities, things to be managed within this bigger financial setup.
Wow, okay. That's a big claim. And this view, it extends to really foundational things too, like constitutions, right? They see those differently as well.
Precisely. They're not just seen as, blueprints for government or outlining rights. The view presented here is that constitutions, state, federal, doesn't matter, are essentially banking charters.
Banking charters.
Yeah. The argument is their main purpose isn't just setting up government in the usual sense, like a social contract. It's more about creating a legal structure specifically designed to manage debt. And importantly, to benefit international creditors.
International creditors. So less about we the people and more about finance.
According to this perspective, yes, it suggests the foundational agreement is primarily financial, which, that really flips the script on how we usually understand government legitimacy.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
So if the constitutions are seen as these banking charters,
Yeah.
what about all the laws? Actual codes we deal with day to day, where do they fit in?
Well, according to these sources, the huge body of legal codes, statutes, regulations, they serve a more, let's say, functional purpose. They're presented as tools for moral control, even religious control, in some interpretations within the sources.
Control.
Yeah, the claim is they're used to influence people, manage the population, and also to make it easier to, extract assets, take things, but make it look legal. It's all part of maintaining control within this alleged financial system.
Okay, this is where it gets really practical, maybe. The sources talk about our assets, like money in the bank, or even things like our cars that are registered. What's the claim there?
Right. The claim is when you deposit money or register property like a car,
Okay.
it's not necessarily held for you in the way you'd assume.
Meaning?
The sources suggest this stuff often goes into what they call off-budget accounts. Hidden accounts, maybe, controlled by the state. And the key point they stress is the loss of individual control. So you might have a certificate of title for your car, for example.
Yeah, I do.
But the argument is that the legal title, the real ownership recognized within this governmental bank system, actually resides elsewhere with the state or whoever controls that account.
So I hold a piece of paper, but maybe not the ultimate ownership.
It's definitely a different way of looking at ownership, kind of like holding stock versus owning the company's actual buildings.
Okay, I think I get the analogy. And what about the people in this system? Judges, lawyers, how are they portrayed?
They often use the term bar attorneys. That includes judges, too, in this view. And they're depicted basically as brokers or agents.
Brokers for the bank.
Essentially, yes. Agents operating within this governmental banking system. Their job, according to this perspective, is processing the flow of these financial and legal instruments. Think of cases, fines, bonds. They're seen as instruments being processed for the system's benefit, not necessarily focused on justice for the individual involved.
So the whole legal system is framed as a mechanism for financial processing.
That's the picture these sources paint, yeah.
It really does change how you'd see a courtroom. Now, there was a really specific detail in the material about court orders, warrants, dismissals, things like that. Something about the seal.
Yes. The official seal. This is a very specific point they make. The claim is that if a court order or a warrant or even a dismissal is missing an official embossed court seal,
Embossed, okay.
then that document is allegedly fraudulent. It's considered non-binding. The idea is, without that specific physical mark of authority from the court seen as a branch of the bank, the document lacks legitimacy within this system.
So a missing seal could mean the order isn't valid, in their view. But those orders still get enforced, don't they?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The sources raise the issue of validity based on the seal, but the practical reality often seems different. It's one of the tensions in these claims.
Definitely something to think about. Okay, let's shift slightly.
Yeah.
The sources also get into who the real owners are supposed to be. Owners of America, its assets. This sounds like it might connect to sovereign citizen type ideas.
It does seem to align with some of those concepts, yes. The assertion is that individuals, people like you and me, acting in our natural capacity, maybe as sovereigns or even as creditors to the system, yes, that we are the actual true owners, the trustees of the land, and by extension, these governmental banks. And the current system, mainly through using those legal fictions we mentioned, like your name in all caps on documents, distinct from you, the living person.
Right, I've seen that mentioned.
That system allegedly obscures this fundamental reality. It hides the fact that the ultimate ownership and authority rests with the people. That's the claim.
Okay, this is going deep. There were also some specific forms mentioned. Treasury Forms, 1455 and 1522. What's the deal with those?
Right. Forms 1455 and 1522. These are described in the sources as essentially banking forms.
Okay.
Their supposed purpose is for processing and collecting assets, specifically assets that are seen as prepaid and held in government trust accounts. These accounts are allegedly linked to things like your birth certificate, maybe property titles. The idea is these forms are like special withdrawal slips to access that value.
Access value linked to my birth certificate. How would that even work?
Well, the mechanism isn't fully detailed in the excerpts we have, but the core idea is that these forms are the key to tapping into these hidden accounts or trusts allegedly set up for individuals.
And there's a catch, right? It's not just filling them out. Something about another seal.
Exactly. This seems crucial in the sources for these Treasury Forms, 1455 and 1522, to be considered legitimate, to be seen as official banking documents that actually work within this system. They must apparently bear something called an official governmental banking seal. And critically, this seal isn't from the Treasury itself, but supposedly has to come from a specific county officer.
A county officer? Like who?
The sources mention the county recorder or the treasurer or the auditor. One of those local officials needs to put their specific seal on these Treasury Forms. Without that local governmental banking seal, the forms are considered, well, invalid for their intended purpose, according to this view.
So a federal form needs a local county seal to unlock alleged federal trust assets. That's specific.
Very specific. It highlights this connection they draw between local county offices as branches of the governmental bank and the larger federal structure.
Okay, let's try and wrap our heads around this whole picture then. These sources are essentially arguing that our government and court systems are, at their core, a type of governmental bank. They manage money and legal fictions. The banking system itself is called fraudulent. Constitutions are just banking charters for debt.
Right, and legal codes are tools for control and extracting assets.
Our deposited money and registered property might end up in off-budget state accounts where we lose real control.
Lawyers and judges act as brokers processing financial instruments within this system.
And court orders without a proper embossed seal are supposedly invalid.
While individuals are claimed to be the true owners or trustees, but this is hidden by legal fictions.
And finally, specific Treasury Forms, 1455 and 1522, are supposed to access prepaid assets, but only if they have a special seal from a local county official. They get the main points.
I think that's a really good summary of the core claims presented in the material we looked at. It's quite a framework, isn't it? It offers this completely alternative lens for viewing everyday legal and financial structures, suggests this whole hidden financial layer.
Absolutely. And you can see how concepts like legal fictions, that idea your legal name isn't you, you might suddenly seem more significant in this context. Or just thinking about the potential financial angle behind, say, a traffic ticket or a court case.
Hmm.
It definitely gives you pause. Those could be the aha moments for some listeners.
For sure. But it's really important for everyone listening to remember where this comes from. This deep dive explored a very specific, unconventional viewpoint that was presented in the sources you shared with us. We're just laying out those claims as they were articulated.
Exactly. We're not endorsing them. We're not debunking them here today. Just exploring the ideas presented in the material. So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Just consider if. What if these claims about how the system fundamentally works? What if they hold some truth? What might that imply about your rights? About what ownership really means? About how you interact with government, with the courts? It certainly makes you question assumptions, doesn't it? And encourages, I think, some independent critical thinking about these huge systems that shape our lives. Food for thought.